You hear it? There he is. I'll go ahead and delete all that out. All right. So, as I said, my guest has an extensive background in law enforcement education. He is a graduate of North Carolina Central University. He knows and he understands policy. He has been a political science instructor and has been a general counsel and ethics officer for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. He serves as a chair board of ethics to the WSSC and currently in the role as principal at Pruden Hinkson Solutions. And I don't even know what kind of absolute, if you would call it luck, that I have gotten here, that he agreed to speak with us tonight. And let me just go ahead and bring him on in because I want to introduce to you guys Mr. George Pruden. Click it, Mr. Pruden. Yes. Yes.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Good
Good
afternoon,
evening.
sir. Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
We got this thing together.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's absolutely perfect. So I was telling the guys that, I started this many voices of the community as an extension of my weekly radio show called Community Voices, which can be heard on Ablazin Radio from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. on Wednesdays. Back when we were shut down. We a little bit open, but we were shut down. And I was going crazy. And I'm like, is anybody else out there going crazy? And ways we could connect and uplift each other. And then George Floyd happened. And now it's the aftermath of all of that, the anger, the rage, but still a way to mentally and physically check in and say, George Pruden, how are you doing?
I am surviving just like everyone else. These are interesting times for everyone. Not used to being in the house as much as I've been in the house, so I'm adjusting to that. Not used to seeing, so much trouble in the streets. It's very disturbing, unsettling, and kind of harkens back to the days when I remember when Martin Luther King was shot. I don't think I've seen this much unsettledness in the country in a while. Probably a good thing, though, because I think hopefully some good positive steps will come out of this. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Yeah. It's funny because when I started this, thinking about this conversation, you think it's going to go one way and it just based on research, just based on now I'm seeing you, I just know it's going to go ebb and flow in such a different way. And especially with you starting off with how we have not seen this magnitude since the death of Martin Luther King, since, even before that, the civil unrest with, the voting rights and the civil rights and all of that stuff, which we'll definitely get back into. It doesn't seem like it was just 2 weeks ago that Brother George Floyd was murdered. And the visual is nothing like we've ever seen before. I feel you are a little seasoned, but have you ever seen something to that magnitude?
Not someone being killed. I mean, I've actually, we saw Rodney King get beaten up very badly. No, that was surreal to watch this guy have his life expire right on on someone's camera on their phone is nothing short of, I mean, it was very disturbing. You don't know what's going through the minds of the police officers that were involved at that time, other than, I mean, the guy who was Chauvin, I'm looking at him and I'm thinking to myself at that particular moment, what are you thinking? The guy's telling you he can't breathe. Depending on who you believe, one of his fellow officers was asking him to relinquish some of the pressure that was on him. He's looking at the crowd with his hand in his pocket, and I'm thinking, what in the world are you thinking at that particular moment? It was amazing to watch. Very disturbing. Just one of those things that, it's seared in your mind, and you can't get it out.
Yeah. Now, I know you've always known that you're Black, but when did you first become aware of your Blackness and the power it held, whether it was to infuse or to inflame someone?
Well, I would say I grew up during the times when schools were segregated, at least early on. And I remember living in Norfolk, Virginia, and having to walk about 10 or 12 blocks to a school. And the little white girl who lived 3 houses down from me went to a different school. I
Mm-hmm.
remember not being able to bring books home. I remember segregated beaches in Norfolk and Virginia Beach. I remember movie theaters that were segregated. And even if you went to the white theater, you had to sit in the balcony. I remember the Woolworth where you couldn't sit at the counter and eat. I remember my mother packing us up to go down to North Carolina to her home and being told that we had to use the bathroom now because there were no places to stop along the way. And, if you had to go, you just had to hold it. I mean,
Yeah.
these are the kind of things that, when you grow up in the South and you kind of experience those kind of things, you find a way to survive. And that is what, when I talk to young folks nowadays, and, for those of us who've been around longer than a minute, you have to tell them, we will come out of this. We are a strong people. We have survived slavery, Jim Crow, uh, segregation. We've been called everything but a child of God. We will come out on the other side. It's going to be interesting for a while.
Yeah. And Coretta Scott King said once, and I'm majorly paraphrasing if I can remember it. I remember she said something to this effect, but even when we think we've won, we have to keep on fighting. Are we naive? Or I mean, it's true, but we get so tired, Mr. George.
It's, but you know what? You can't give up. And that's the part that I'm most concerned about right now because everyone is energized. All of the young folk are out there, and we need the young folk doing what they're doing within reason. Doing the right stuff. The looting and stuff, we can maybe put that on the back burner. But out there protesting, letting people know that they're committed. We need that energy in November because if you want to change, you can't blame everything that happens in this country on Donald Trump. You can't blame him for the pandemic. He didn't cause it. He didn't help it. You can't blame him for what happened to George Floyd. He didn't cause it. He didn't help it. But he has to get out of office because he is, I think, singularly the worst president I've ever heard. I used to teach political science and I used to teach government. And, I would go back and study presidents. I have never seen anyone quite like him. He is uniquely unqualified for the office from my perspective. And he doesn't have the temperament for the job. But our people they have to get out there in 2020 and vote. They have to do it in November of 2020. We didn't do it in 2016 for a variety of reasons. And, there's a old saying that goes, you get the government you deserve. And we ended up sitting at home, a lot of us, not me. I vote every time because I take the franchise very seriously. I've met people who were out there on the front lines back in the 60s when blacks weren't allowed to vote. Virginia was one of the last states to allow blacks to vote. And in fact, the gentleman that swore me in as a lawyer was the gentleman who took the case against Virginia to the U.S. Supreme Court. And, I remember talking with him, and he used to have to bring people into his office. There were all kind of hurdles that the Virginia government put in place to keep blacks from voting. We have to vote. And what I saw up in Wisconsin this year was fantastic, also kind of wretched to the extent that the government has set up, they tried to postpone the election and they didn't. But people stood out there in the rain and suffered through because they took their voting privilege seriously. We have got to vote in November. We have got to get this man out of office. And once we get him out of office, at least we can try to turn this country around. But we're in for a long, hard slog. We've gotten into a bad place rather quickly, and it's not going to change overnight.
Yeah, and I want to get more into that, but I have a couple questions regarding your growing up. You said you grew up in Northern Virginia during segregation, and race relations, I'm sure, were at an all-time high. I mean, we're talking about, oh, they're taking off their cloaks now. I mean, it was bad even with their cloaks on then, right? Do you think segregation was beneficial for African Americans?
There's at least there's a school of thought that segregation was actually on some levels better for us. And hear me out on this one. When the segregation took place, at one point it was a very homogenized community. You know, we had people who were very poor to, you know, to the educated professionals all living in the same community. When the segregation kicked in and people could move away, people moved away. My mother moved us away. I lived in Norfolk, Virginia, which was predominantly black, and she moved us down to Virginia Beach to some extent because I think she was worried about me and some of my siblings getting into trouble, and some of us did. And we moved down to Virginia Beach, which was 93% white. And I can tell you that that was not a marriage made in heaven. They didn't want us down there. It was not comfortable at all. And I can tell you, I spent a whole lot of times in the principal's office getting my butt spanked for doing stupid stuff. But sometimes just being a young teenager, just trying to find his way.
And speaking of, I mean, in that time, during that, opening and awakening of, now we can mix together. I mean, all kinds of emotions, I'm sure, going through, and you're trying to figure out who you are as a young man. What kind of help did you have to do that? Was your father in the home, or did you have uncles?
My father had passed away when I was 10.
Mm.
My mother was struggling, trying to keep the house going. She worked
How many of you?
At that time, 3, and it was really really tough. And as people got older, I was the last one left there. And I tell people this all the time. She came into right after I finished the 9th grade. She came into me and she said, "Okay, here's the deal. I can put a roof over your head. I can put food on the table. Everything else is on you. All of your clothes, all of your books, all your spending money, whatever you have to do." So I guess I was about 15 at the time. I had to go out and get a job. And I have been working since like 1969. So when I retired years ago, someone said, "Why are you retiring?" I said, "If you have been working as long as I have, you would."
All your life.
So, but that was the deal she struck. And so
Yeah.
I had to work, and that's basically what I had to do. I was a little bit envious of some of my friends, both black and white, who had 2-parent households and who didn't have the pressure of having to work. It was, but you play the hand that you're dealt. You can sit back and say the what ifs. What if I had this, and what if somebody else had been there. It didn't happen that way. And you look to people. There were people that I could look to. I saw some of my friends who had fathers, and you could talk with them and all like that. But there's no substitute for having the father in the household. And I just had to find a way to get there. So you just keep struggling along.
Let me ask you, with your mom being single, she had to work to take care of you and your brothers and sisters. Did you ever get the talk? Did you ever come across, or did anybody ever give you the talk about, if you're pulled over, you cut the light on, you put your hands on 10 and 12, 10 and 2?
I is actually no, but I I tried to avoid the police. I had a couple of siblings who had encounters with the criminal justice system, and I saw what it was doing to them. And the last thing in the world that I wanted to do was go to prison. I mean, when you've lived with someone who has been in prison and you've talked to them, very frankly about their experiences, that was something that I didn't want to replicate by no stretch of the imagination. We kind of knew, you kind of knew that you wanted to avoid contact with the police. There are times you're going to be stopped just because you're black. But I always tried to approach people respectfully. I found out a lot earlier in life that you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And I used to teach the students at when I taught at Norfolk State. I would teach them. What I would say to them is, look, I'm fresh out of law school. I just took the bar exam. I've taken, I used to prosecute. I've taken courses in constitutional law, criminal procedure, criminal law. I said, whenever I get stopped by a police officer, I have one thought in mind: survive the encounter. That was the phrase that I coined for them: survive the encounter. When you get stopped by a police officer, no matter how, foolish you might think it might be, or no matter how weak their argument may be, this is not the time to litigate it. You want to litigate it, get to court. Then you go to court with a lawyer and you tell the judge all the bad things that the police officer did. So I said, if I know I know the law, but I'm not going to sit out there and say, well, technically speaking, you really didn't have probable cause to stop me, so you really need to let me go. No. All I want to do is get my ticket and get the hell away from that person as soon as I possibly can.
Now, Mr. George, I just want to, play devil's advocate for a moment. But at the same time, I do understand what you're saying, because our sister Sandra Bland, we feel as if she did everything by the law. She, even though she had some words back and forth, she got out of the car, so forth and so on afterwards. But there was one little part where he told her to get out the car and she did not. Was that disobeying the law?
Here's my conversation with the police when they stop me. And maybe I can answer it this way.
Okay.
If I am on the phone, whoever I'm on the phone with, and more times than not, when I'm in the car, I'm on the phone with someone, but I have earbuds in. If I'm getting stopped, I will tell them, hey, I'm being stopped right now. I'm going dark. Stay on the phone. Listen to what's being said. When the policeman comes up to me, I put my hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. I let them know that depending on the season that I'm in, either my wallet is in my sock or the wallet is in my back pocket. My registration is in my glove compartment. I do not move without asking for permission. I don't. Yeah, I'm 60-something years old. If that cop is 22 years old, they are in the power position. They have the power dynamic working for them. They have a gun. So everything I say to them is yes, sir, yes, ma'am, no, sir, no, ma'am. If they ask me to get out of the car, I am going to probably say yes. I am not. I don't want to have a debate with them at that particular moment. It may be total BS as to what they're putting me through, but like I said, I'm trying to survive the encounter. If I can walk away, I used to have students tell me, well, if they beat me up, I'm going to end up suing them. I'm like, dude, you might be dead, or, just either dead or handicapped or whatever it may be when they get through. All I want to do is survive the encounter. And maybe it's my temperament. It's just sometimes it's not worth it to have a battle with them.
Yeah.
And I have, we weren't there. We can go on, what we heard on the film. I have a short story. We have a senior basketball team. So there were like 5 of us out one evening, and we're at an Outback up in Rockville, Maryland. So we're sitting there. One of my teammates is an anesthesiologist. One's a banker. Another guy is, I don't know exactly what he did at the time, but 5 of us. And this is something we did after every game. So we're sitting in the Outback, watching the NFL game, just doing what we're doing. There's a white guy at the counter who is drunk as a skunk. And he starts harassing this white lady who's sitting there with her biracial daughter. So, we glance over at the lady. We ask her, are you okay? And she goes, she says she's fine. But we're sitting there. We're kind of watching what's going on, but we're not engaging in a conversation with him. Lo and behold, he calls the police. The police show up. 2 cops show up. He's standing outside talking to one of the cops. The other cops comes in, and he's got his hand on his gun. And so, we're sitting there, and, one of my teammates is about to go ballistic because he knows we haven't done anything. So I addressed the policeman and I let him know. I said, look, I said, we didn't say anything to this guy. I said, the guy is drunk. I said, if you stand near him, you can smell it. All I did was patiently take time to walk him through all that had transpired. And at the end of the day, he said, thank you, gentlemen. And he turned around and walked away. One of my teammates to the day, and this was about maybe 8 or 9 years ago, to the day, he tells me, he said, man, you really saved us. He said, because I was about to go off, that this guy had his hand on his gun. So sometimes you kind of have to swallow that ego. I mean, you want to react. You want to say, why are you messing with me? And sometimes I don't doubt it. I mean, I've had this discussion. I've got a nephew who's, thank God he has a PhD right now. But at one point when he was going through both undergrad and getting his master's at Howard, he was getting stopped. And I kept saying to him, I said, you can't react. I said, I know you're frustrated. And part of it was he had a look about him. And part of it was his hair, unfortunately, that I thought might have been the precipitating event as to why people were stopping him. I don't justify the behavior. Behavior is wrong. But when somebody has to be the cooler head, if a cop shows up and he's already mad at the world for whatever reason, he still has the power dynamic. And at the end of the day, I'm just trying to survive the encounter. Yeah. I can mitigate it later.
Yeah. It's so much, Mr. George. You have a law background, political science. Oh my goodness, we could just talk hours and hours, and I probably still would have so many thousands of questions. Exactly what is ethics, though?
Ethics, basically what I try to do, and what those of us who are ethics officials try to do, we try to keep the agency, all of the staff members and the leadership doing the right thing. And when I worked for the Federal Bureau of Prisons, it was one of the questions I remember. I was over at Howard University Law School recruiting one time, and one of the students asked me, she said, how can you as a Black man work for an organization that incarcerates so many African-American men? And what I explained to her was basically I had no say-so in how these people got there, but I did have a say-so in how they were incarcerated. And so it was my job to make sure that all the employees understood the rules as it related to how inmates were going to be treated, making sure that inmates weren't, involved in any kind of sexual relationships with the staff members and such like that, making sure that the staff members were as above board as they possibly could be. Now, of course, you're always going to have the outliers. People are going to test the system, and there are people who are going to be doing wrong. But, we're more or less like the conscience of the agency. We're the ones that try to keep people from doing things the right way.
Not only that, I mean, when you think about, like I said, the aftermath of George Floyd, I mean, it was just 2 weeks ago. It seems like it was so long. And now how all of these companies and organizations and streaming services, even BET, who's owned by Viacom, says, hey, dear Black people, we stand with you. All of these people given this money, they have these cookie cutter statements and monies are going to be provided. Do you feel like it's a slap, a Band-Aid, or a start to what?
Some of it might be guilt money. They might be feeling guilty, but hey, look, if that money can help to improve schools, if that money can help to establish organizations, especially some of these non-governmental organizations, to help them do their jobs better. If it helps us to, if they help to fund programs that will help people sign up, register to vote, as long as we can put the money to use in the community, they'll get their little 15 minutes of fame behind it. The fact that somebody will have to say, yes, so-and-so gave us, $1 million or, whatever the amount may be. All of that helps, but at least it's a start in the right direction. I mean, think about it. Until George Floyd died, were they reaching their pockets, pulling out anything?
Yeah, and then that goes into the question of policy, because you have a background in policy as well. Like, has anybody written any policies on behalf of African Americans? Is Congress stopping these things? Like, how does that whole piece work?
Well, it works again through voting. You have to implement. Not everything that takes place in this country comes top down. Some of it comes from the bottom up. And that means that we have to go out there and vote. And we're not voting strictly for president. We have to vote for people in the General Assembly of the respective states. We have to vote for city council members. We have to vote for district attorneys. Look at Minnesota. The fact that they have an attorney general who's an African American, Keith Ellison, who is a brilliant person.
Yes, sir.
Makes a difference.
Yeah.
Think about the fact that what happened down in Georgia with Aubrey. Until the state stepped in there, the local prosecutors weren't doing anything. Local prosecutors run for office. We need to have local prosecutors. We need to have people of color in those offices. We need to have people sitting on city council. Those people who are chiefs of police are hired by mayors and oftentimes approved by the city council members. So we need people in these offices. It makes all the difference in the world. The diversity is good because you need that voice in the room to help you do things the right way. There are some things the federal government can mandate, but they can't mandate everything. There are 18,000 police departments. The federal government provides money, but they don't run them all.
Yeah. So, the new lingo is hashtag defund the police. And, we're slowly starting to understand what that means. It doesn't mean obliterate and wipe out police departments all throughout the world, because we know that we can't. We know what it was built upon, and we know what the systemic situation is built upon, even with the Federal Bureau of Prisons. This is a hard nut to crack. We say, vote, vote, vote. What does my vote matter? Somebody died for my right to vote. Did they really? Did it matter? Does it matter? But one thing I do know is that it also provides us a seat on the jury box, right?
Yep.
It provides us a seat on the jury box. It provides us a vote, a say in who's in those offices, like you said. Gianna, George Floyd's daughter, said it so right when she said that her daddy changed the world. Just the fact that these mayors are stepping up and doing what they should have been doing, and probably what they wanted to do for a very long time. And this gives them that fuel and that fire. And so I'm so here for it. Now, what I am definitely here for is November is getting what I call your president, the national dumpster, out of here. How dare he, Mr. George? How dare he go and conduct this first rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma?
Unbelievable.
Now, I saw in passing the president of the NAACP out in Tulsa was talking on CNN. But I wish all of my people out in Tulsa would rise up like nobody's ever seen before. What's wrong with this man?
It's not that it's in Tulsa, where they had, just one of the worst events involving the slaughter of Black people, but it's also on Juneteenth. Unbelievable. But as I was telling someone earlier today, I said that smacks. If you looked at the people surrounding Trump when he walked over to St. John's Church to have his little photo op with the Bible, did you see, other than I think it was one African American sister who was a Secret Service agent, and she's doing her job, so you can't fault her.
Yeah.
Right. She didn't have any say so. Did you see anybody of color? This guy, I wonder, because he doesn't read, so you don't think he knows anything about history. Who would have picked the location, and who would have picked that date? If there was someone of color around him, they would have told him, Mr. President,
you don't want to do that.
Bad day, bad.
No, what it is that they're looking at all of the things that the Black folks are saying, how this was so important. And I really feel like it's that little Steve guy that's in there, like,
Miller.
Would this be so wonderful if you.
Yeah.
Listen, how do we unify? Because I feel like we do have to keep an eye over here on what they do, but how do we unify? We deal with colorism. We deal with old against young. We deal with emotions and men and women dealing with one another. We deal with so much stress and pressure that we all have to deal with as Black people. How do we unify?
Well, you know, again, I think it's a matter of us, sticking together, and trying to do this with this pandemic still, looming around in the background. Uh, the point that I keep trying to make to folk is this is the election that's coming up in November is more than just a presidential election. Because if you remember when President Barack Obama won and when he got into office, some of the cabal came together and they basically met in a little building in DC and they said, let's do our best to make sure that he's a one-term president. Well, if everything goes according to the book, and even if Joe Biden gets in there, you still have to flip the Senate to get Mitch McConnell out of the leadership position. He's probably not going to lose, but there are a number of senatorial races where there's a pretty good chance that a Democrat can win. You have to get at least 50 Democrats so that at least the vice president will be able to break any ties. It would be nice to, get a little comfortable number here or there. But turning out for those elections make all the difference in the world. Also, the elections will help to put into place the people that will be in the state legislatures, and those people will also be involved in helping to draw the districts that people will be working in,
Yeah.
and running from. So that is why we have to vote. If there's ever an opportunity for the momentum to change how this country works, I'm those people that are in a position to run. I want Stacey Abrams to go back to Georgia and run for one of those Senate seats. I think one guy has already kind of sealed that one. But if she goes back and runs, and she would be the second African-American sister in the Senate from Georgia, that would be huge.
Huge.
So, we need all of those people that are in there need to stay, and we need to go out there and fill the ballot box and not wait around to the last minute to vote. I mean, in some states, I live in Maryland, and so for me, I can vote absentee ballot. I don't need somebody to sign off on me doing it, and then I can also vote early. But in those states where you can vote early, go vote early. Do not wait until November to vote. If you wait.
So two things behind that. What if I don't even really know who I'm voting for? Like, what do I do? Where do I go to find out, like, what their records are, like, what they really think? How do I find that out? Because I think that's part of the reason why people don't vote, or they just select a name, because they really don't know who they're voting for.
Well, the internet is a wonderful thing, and you can also read. Reading is fundamental, as the United Negro College Fund used to say all the time.
Yeah.
There is so much information, and if you don't know, call up. Go to a forum where the local congressman, the local council member is speaking. Ask them questions. Write letters. I'll give an example. When I was a senior in college, I served as a legislative aide in the General Assembly of Virginia. And I worked for an older white guy who was like number 7 in seniority. He would come in and we would go through the mail, and he would ask us, okay, how's the mail on this particular bill? And we would say there are 4 letters for it and 2 letters against it. He said, I'm voting for it then, because my people have spoken, and it's 4-2. You write a letter, it oftentimes means something. My late mother, my sister was in the Marine Corps. She hated it. I was in the Marine Corps, and it's not everyone's acquired taste, but she hated it. My mother started a letter writing campaign that included both U.S. senators from the state of Virginia, as well as President Nixon. She got my sister out about a year early.
Wow.
Because she was a gigantic pain in the rear. If you are interested in change, express what your feelings and your opinions are. And part of that, being a citizen is knowing exactly what's going on. You have a duty
Yep.
to know who the hell you're voting for.
Yep. Yep. All right. The other thing about voting, so, it's a lot of talk about voter suppression, especially in the southern states. And people were talking about how the lines were very, very long. Is it possible that I know I have to go to this particular school, but can I not go to this one over here? I'm a registered voter.
No, you normally have to go to the precinct that you're assigned to, and if you go to the wrong one, 9 times out of 10, they're going to end up sending you to the right one. When I moved in Maryland, it took them, unfortunately, about 8 years to move me from precinct A to precinct B, where I should have been. So every time I would go back to precinct B, thinking that's where I should. Nope. You got to go back over here. So I was going to vote. So it was a matter of, and every time after every election, I would call them and say, "Hey, folks, I've already submitted this form like 4 or 5 times." Sometimes voter registration offices aren't always well funded or well staffed, and nobody hears about them until we have a screw up during an election.
Right.
My thing is, and I say this knowing that people gave their lives for the right for us to vote. I'm going to vote. I have never missed my voting opportunity since I became old enough to vote. I take pride in that.
Yeah. Well, I'm very happy for you. I'm telling you, I can talk to you forever. I really only have 2-3 more questions.
Okay.
Part of this is, I started this Mental Health Awareness Month, and it occurred to me after George Floyd passed away, after George Floyd was murdered, that not only are my brothers angry and tired and fed up, but a lot of times my brothers suffer in silence about what's going on with them. And there are not a lot of people that they can talk to. There's only a handful of good friends that you have. Sometimes it's really hard to talk to your mate because, one, we talk too much and we just want you to man up. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about men's mental health, and have you ever been aware of it? Have you ever sought help, or what kind of things do you do for self-care to keep yourself centered?
Well, one thing I do is I have good friends, both male and female friends that I stay in contact with. I live alone, and so for me, I tell people, I said, when you live in a house with someone else, you at least have somebody to talk to on a day-to-day basis. I don't have a dog. I don't have a cat. It's just me by myself. So I have to make sure I maintain outreach to friends and family. I tell, folks, I said, if you haven't heard from me in a day, because I get up, I read at night. I say, if you haven't seen an article from me or something like that, I send articles to people all the time. That way they know I'm still alive and breathing.
Okay.
These are tough times, and folks that I know who are, what I've told a psychologist friend of mine, I said, they're going to be so busy at the end of this pandemic and at the end of, whatever we're going through right now and trying to get the police in check.
Yeah.
I said, we're going to need to have all the psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors and therapists are going to be making money hand over fist. And we have to avail ourselves of their help. Have I sought help before? Yeah, I went through a divorce. It wasn't a terrible divorce, but one of my best friends came over to me and he had gone through 2 of them. He said, it's not a walk in the park. He said, you're going to need help. And so, yes, my therapist was the best money I spent. Once a month, I would go see her. And that was the best money I spent that month.
Okay.
There's no shame in seeking help.
That's what I wanted to hear. There's no shame in seeking help. Yeah. Well, June 21st is Father's Day. And any tips that we can get gifts for our loved ones?
Just call your father. Or, if you're having to, sort of like be the surrogate because you have a kid, just let the father know that you care. I think most fathers, all they want a nice thank you. That'll do the trick.
Wow. And all these times I've been getting ties and
If you're getting them tags, leave the tags on so they can take it back.
Okay, that'll be it. That'll be it. Oh my goodness. I honestly, I can talk to you for hours upon hours, but I definitely want to respect the time. Normally these conversations are only 30 minutes, but you have just been a jewel and a light of inspiration and conversation. And I so appreciate you. Guys, this is Mr. George Pruden. He is extensive background in law enforcement, education, graduate of North Carolina Central University, knows and understands policy, political and science instructor, has been general counsel to an ethics officer for the Federal Bureau of Prisons, serves as chair to the board of the WSSC, and currently a principal at Pruden Hinkson Solutions, and just an absolute joy and gem, Mr. George Pruden. Sir, where can I get an article from you?
I don't know. I need to write, but I just haven't done a whole lot of writing. I'm trying to figure out my act two yet. I'm still sort of like feeling my way around.
Yeah. Well, how have you been since coronavirus? I mean, are you still masking up? I mean, you think we should go out? Is it time to open?
I have a dozen masks. I have masks in every car. I carry a mask in my pocket. I've got a mask in my right pocket. I've got gloves in my left pocket. I am, you know what? There's no shame in my game. Dr. Fauci says, wear a mask. I'm wearing a mask.
Yeah. I listen to Dr. Fauci as well. I do too. Any last words? Any final words, sir?
No, I think we have to stay strong. We have to stay vigilant. We have to stay unified, and we have to persevere. You know, we've been through bad times before. We'll come out on the other side. We just have to survive it.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for your time, and for your audience. I just wanted to let them know that my name is MoMo Love, and I have a weekly internet radio talk show called Community Voices. It airs Wednesdays from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. on Ablazin Radio. You can download the free app or listen live on the website at www.ablazinradio.com. Mr. George Pruden, thank you so much.
My pleasure. All right. Great day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.